Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Letson, and I used to be a firefighter. I live on the central coast of California, and back in 1994, while on duty, I had a near-death experience that changed my life in a huge way. At that time, I didn't know how to explain it, or even where to find answers. So, I kept it to myself for many years, almost 15 or 16. But when I retired, the memory came rushing back, and I started searching for answers. That journey took me to some fascinating places, learning about ancient wisdom, Native American beliefs, and how their understanding sometimes missed the bigger picture that combines history, science, and religion. But before I get into all that, let me start by sharing what happened during my near-death experience. It was 1994, and I was on duty at Station 11, a paramedic station in Goleta. There was a big flu outbreak in the Santa Barbara area, and the hospitals were full of people who were really sick. It was like how things were during COVID, with emergency teams running non-stop. One day, we got called to help a woman who had been stuck in her room with all the curtains closed. She was very sick. As a paramedic, I jumped into action. I climbed across her bed to put an oxygen mask on her, and just as I got it in place, she exhaled, and I accidentally breathed in her air. A couple of days later, I got so sick it felt like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It got so bad that I needed an ambulance. I remember getting out of bed, but I was severely dehydrated from throwing up and everything else. When I looked in the mirror, I looked terrible, like a skeleton. My heart was racing at 150 beats per minute, and when I tried to feel my pulse at my wrist, there was nothing. I knew my blood pressure was dangerously low. I called my family, and my niece dialed 911. Santa Barbara County Fire arrived, started 2 IVs, and rushed me to the hospital. The hospital was packed with others who had similar symptoms. The doctor there was giving everyone the same treatment, something for pain and something for nausea. After about 30 minutes on the floor, I started to feel better and thought I could go home to start recovering. But the nurse told me the doctor's orders were for everyone to get the same medication, so I agreed to it. That's when things took a turn. My wife said the nurse pushed all the medication into my food quickly. It was Nubane, a synthetic morphine, and something for nausea. I didn't even need either of those, but as soon as she did it, my eyes rolled back and I passed out. She said it looked like something out of a cartoon. Everyone panicked, and they had to give me Narcan, a drug used to reverse the effects of opioids. They tried it twice, but my blood pressure dropped so low they couldn't even get a reading. I was sent to intensive care, and they worked through the night to stabilize me. The doctors later said the only reason I probably survived was because I was a triathlete at the time, doing Ironman races, so my body was in great shape. Even then, my blood vessels had dilated so much from the morphine that my system could barely circulate blood. That night, sometime around 1 or 1:30 a.m., I left my body. It was incredible. It felt like escaping from a hot, cramped closet and stepping into the most amazing, expansive space. I found myself surrounded by what I call stars, giant, colorful stars that felt alive and welcoming. Some people might call them orbs, but they were energetic, loving beings, and I was one too. My body felt like a huge, glowing cloud, and I can't describe how amazing it was. Flying through those stars felt like pure joy, like the most wonderful feeling in the world, as if someone was pouring warm honey through my entire body. It was so freeing, and everything felt alive and perfect. I realized how hard life on Earth is compared to this place. As I kept flying, I started to remember who I really was. It was like shaking off a dream. I couldn't believe I had forgotten my true self or had been so caught up in my life on Earth, thinking about relationships, problems, and daily struggles. None of it was real. It was like a game or an illusion tied to being human. These colorful orbs welcomed me like I was coming home. It was pure love, joy, and acceptance. And then, all of a sudden, I landed in a place that was solid and real. The place I ended up in was fascinating. It wasn't very bright, but there was soft, indirect lighting. I saw tables, equipment, and some beings moving around. Right in front of me stood 3 short, chubby figures wearing dark robes with hoods. I could see parts of their faces, and they were grinning from ear to ear, their eyes sparkling with excitement. They were asking me all kinds of questions, giggling like they were sharing an inside joke, and I felt confused. Their appearance reminded me of these little elf-like characters I'd seen in the movie Communion years ago. But these guys weren't creepy. They were cheerful, playful, and full of mischief. They were thrilled to see me, saying things like, "How was it? What did you learn? Can you tell us more?" At one point, one of them turned to the others and said, "He doesn't remember us." They burst into laughter, and I started to feel like I kind of recognized them, but I couldn't quite place where from. Then another figure appeared, a tall, wispy being. He looked like he was made of mist or vapor, almost like someone you'd see underwater. His body seemed to shift and flow as he moved. Despite his unusual appearance, his smile was enormous, and his bright eyes radiated love and kindness. This tall, misty being was clearly in charge, but not in a strict way. Everything felt lighthearted, as if the whole scene was just a fun game. When he came near me, I felt a powerful sensation in my chest. It was like my heart and throat were going to burst with overwhelming love. It was so intense I thought I might start crying uncontrollably, but it wasn't sadness, it was pure love. The three little guys continued giggling and bouncing around, while the tall being chuckled warmly. At one point, I said, "Well, I'm not going back there, so let's get on with it. Are we going to do a life review?" The tall being laughed deeply and replied, "Sure. How do you want to start?" I thought, this isn't how it's supposed to go. I shared a couple of small regrets, like not taking a summer job as a park ranger on an island. My wife had wanted to go, but I chose a different job instead. The tall being just smiled and said, "Okay, that's enough. It's time to go back." I was stunned. "Go back? No way." I said, "What are you talking about? I'm staying here." But he was firm. "You have things to do," he replied. The three little beings suddenly disappeared, and the tall figure stepped closer. I pleaded, saying, "The only people who'll miss me are my wife and parents, and they'll be okay after a couple of weeks." He found that funny but repeated, "You're going back?" Then the place around me started to fade, breaking apart like a TV changing channels. It felt like I was descending, like my frequency was dropping. The tall being vanished, and I fell into darkness. Before returning to my body, I passed through a terrifying place, lonely and dismal. I hadn't admitted this for years, but I realized it was important to share. It's not somewhere anyone would want to stay. Eventually, I was back in my body. I woke up hooked to medical equipment, and I noticed my blood pressure slowly climbing, 44/0, then into the 60s and 70s. A nurse came by and was surprised to see me awake. She said, "We weren't sure what was going to happen to you." I asked her, "Why am I back here? I was home with people I loved. How did I end up back here?" I told her I was sure I had bought the farm, but she laughed and said, "Honey, you were in escrow, but you fell out and now you're back with us." Her joke lightened the mood, but I was still sad to be back. For a few days, I felt down, not deeply depressed, but disappointed. I could feel the memory of that place slipping away, becoming harder to hold on to. Soon, it felt like something I could almost convince myself hadn't happened. But I started sharing my story. I told everyone that death wasn't something to fear. It's nothing like we imagine. It's a massive upgrade, instant and perfect. When people came to me grieving a lost loved one, I tell them the same thing. Nobody is really gone. We just leave the physical and go home. I was still me when I left my body. I still had my humor, my thoughts. It was seamless. This idea was hard for some to grasp, but it was true. Of course, not everyone wanted to hear it. One coworker warned me, "People are starting to talk about you." So, I kept quiet for a long time, 15 years to be exact. Then, in 2010, after I retired, the story took a new turn. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch and explore this incredible journey with me. If you found this story meaningful or thought-provoking, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos diving into similar experiences and insights. And if you think someone else might benefit from hearing this, please share it with them. Your support helps spread these messages of hope and connection. Until next time, take care and stay curious.